Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another Q&A session with Maryland gubernatorial candidates. My name is Hunter Craig, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Maryland Student Coalition, and I will be the moderator for today's event. This session is being recorded and footage will be uploaded online, so those of you who do not wish to have your cameras on do not have to. And so for those of you watching at home or are joining and don't know what the MSC is, we are an education advocacy organization that pushes for proactive legislative efforts on the state and local level. Our group is composed of 100 secondary and post-secondary students hailing from 16 different Maryland counties. More information regarding our group can be found at the link in the description of this video. But before we begin, I'd like to give the opportunity for the rest of the MSC leadership who's joining us today to introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm John DePietro. I'm the director of the Maryland Student Coalition. I'm a freshman student at American University and a K-12 product of the Howard County Public School System. Unfortunately, our other two directors couldn't make it today, Chris Ledard, an associate director, and Vinay Khosla, also an associate director, and they send their regards.
Great, thank you. So the purpose of these events is to provide students with an opportunity to ask candidates for Maryland governor their stances on various education and youth-related issues. Our topics will be focused on our legislative portfolio of students' rights to free speech and diversity in curriculum, as well as other youth-related issues if time pertains. Unfortunately, Mr. Moore was unable to join today due to an unforeseen schedule conflict, but joining us is his running mate and former Maryland delegate, Aruna Miller. Ms. Miller, we'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Well, Hunter, John, and to all the members that are here, thank you for hosting. And again, Wes sends his deep regrets that he couldn't be here. And we thank you for understanding that. So on behalf of Wes Moore and myself and our entire team, it's a great honor to be with the leaders like all of you. And let me tell you, I have worked with members of the MCS during my role as a delegate in the Maryland General Assembly. So thank you for your leadership. Just a little bit about who I am. Maryland's been my home for over 32 years. This is where my husband and I raised our three daughters who all went to Montgomery County Public Schools. I am a civil engineer by profession. I spent 25 years as a transportation engineer right here in Montgomery County. And then I had the great honor of serving the people of Legislative District 15 as their Maryland state delegate for 8 years. And now I get to have the great honor of being on the ticket as a lieutenant governor with my friend Wes Moore for governor. And I'm sure many of you already know quite a bit about Wes's resume, but just to give you a quick summary, he's an incredible individual. And I will say that Wes was born right here in Tacoma Park in Montgomery County. And of course, he spent most of his life, though, in Baltimore City. Wes is a U.S. combat veteran, Army veteran. He is an entrepreneur. He ran the largest nonprofit anti-poverty organization in the United States called the Robin Hood Foundation. He was a CEO there for many years. He is a Rhodes Scholar. He is a White House Fellow. You know, and I got to tell you a quick story about his White House Fellow incident. So we ran into an individual that actually served on the board on who gets to be the next White House Fellow. I don't know how familiar you all are with this program, but it started in 1964 under President Johnson. Since then, I believe there's only been like 816 White House Fellows. So it's a very prestigious program. And this individual, when he was interviewing Wes Moore, said, you know, our whole board spent about 2 minutes deciding whether Wes Moore should be a White House Fellow. We all looked at each other and we said, yeah, Wes Moore should be on here. We spent 2.5 hours on every other candidate that were applying. And so the interesting thing is one of his White House Fellows said about Wes, even among standouts, Wes Moore was a standout. And that's exactly what Wes Moore is going to be for the state of Maryland. That's exactly what he's going to be to the students across the state of Maryland as well. So thank you very much for having me here.
Awesome. So I'll quickly explain how this event will run. It will be very simple. Once we begin the Q&A, each attendee will have the chance to ask questions regarding education directly to Ms. Miller. We ask the candidate to respond to each of these questions within 1 to 3 minutes, so we have enough time for everyone. We'll start with questions from our senior associates and our associates if time pertains, and then we'll open the floor to anyone else, just to ensure an orderly flow. I'll ask the participants to please click the raise hand button in the lower right corner of your screen before turning on mics. This will prevent any interruption. So without further ado, let's get into the Q&A. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, Hunter.
So I can kind of kick off the conversation. Thank you, Ms. Miller, for sharing both your extensive experience and Mr. Moore's. My question is about with student protests. Were you or Wes or Mr. Moore ever involved with student demonstrations, either as college students or high school students or in your youth? And how did that kind of shape your experience entering civil service?
No, that's a great question, Hunter. Look, I'm not really sure whether Wes was involved. You would have to ask that question, or I could certainly ask him later. But myself, certainly. I remember in college protesting on events that were taking place there. I think we had a speaker that came that we felt wasn't the right individual that should be speaking to our university. I remember going and protesting on that. We had issues related to an organization, and they wanted to stop that organization from hosting any future events for student body. So we protested against that. And I was actually part of the college newspaper. So that really, as you know, the media plays a big role in making sure that there is unbiased opinions out there for students to be aware of. So it is a critical part of our citizenry, and we need to make sure that, you know, that students' voices are heard as part of our democracy, and we wholeheartedly support peaceful protests.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Can I ask a question?
Oh, yes, but I see Dhruvi has a question. So
Sure.
let's ask one first.
Hi, thanks so much for your time today. My name is Dhruva Kumarani. I'm a high school senior public school student in Howard County. I got a chance to look at the Moore Miller Public Safety Plan, and in it you state that you want to set aside federal funds for local programs to engage young people in schools about the possibility of becoming a law enforcement officer. Could you tell me about what that might look like in practice? Because that idea personally makes me a bit uncomfortable as a student of color in a predominantly white school and in a county with a predominantly white police force. And then I also noticed that you talk about restorative justice and disrupting the school to prison pipeline in this plan, but don't mention school resource officers. So I was hoping to know whether or not you and Mr. Moore support the presence of armed law enforcement in school buildings.
Sure. Thank you, Dhruvi, for that question. So let's begin with the school resource officers. First of all, that is a local issue that's really up to the parents, educators, the Board of Education to determine what they believe is the best thing to do in their schools. Now, are there concerns with student resource officers? There is a lot of concern related to that. And I will say one of the biggest things is that these are law enforcement officers whose job is to implement criminal law, right? And that's not exactly what we want in a school setting where we are encouraging students to learn and to have a social, academic environment. I'm not sure that really is a good presence to have there. You know, and we know that SROs, yes, that there is disproportionate impact on Black and Brown students when you have SRO officer, and that is of concern. Look, there is good and bad in every field and industry. There have been SRO officers that have come in and were able to break up very difficult situations. Let's say a student pulls out a knife. You know, is it an educator that we want breaking up that fight, or do you want someone that understands how to deal with a situation like that to be there? Then there's been other incidents where we had SRO officers go and arrest a 5-year-old and put handcuffs on them. That isn't appropriate whatsoever. So I think there is, it's really up to the locals to decide what they believe is best. And again, it has to include the entire community, students and parents and teachers and administrators, all of them to be at the table to decide what's best. But my personal opinion, again, this is me, I am not in favor of having SRO officers for the reasons I just defined, because I believe Black and Brown students are disproportionately impacted by the aggressive behavior of them. Now, I think your other question was about encouraging students to get into law enforcement. Look, law enforcement, again, there's a lot of good that comes from it. They do protect our society. They do, protect us from crimes and violence. And we need to acknowledge that. It's not an easy job to be a law enforcement officer. But having said that, I know there's been a lot that has been happening since the beginning of time, where again, not just in the school system, but out of the school system, where Black and Brown communities are disproportionately negatively impacted by law enforcement. And we need to be able to educate them and give the training that they need and hold them accountable for when there are missteps along the way, that we cannot just ignore it. We need to be able to hold them accountable. Now, as far as encouraging young people to get into this field, I think that it's helpful to have members of the Black and Brown community to be part of law enforcement, to be part of the education system, to be part of every sector in our community. Because the more we have diversity amongst the employees that represent our community, the better we'll be able to connect and understand the unique needs of communities, whether it's racial, ethnicity, religious, gender, LGBTQ, whatever it may be. They will have a better understanding of the sensitivities related to those communities. Wes has often spoke about having a year of service, Dhruvi. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Essentially, what he's saying is that once a student graduates from high school, it would be one of the things the Moore Miller administration is going to implement is a 1 year of service. So once they graduate, that they can pick any area in public service that interests them the most, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's education, whether it's environment. During that year, they would get paid. So that would help to pay for their college education as they move further along. More importantly, service is sticky. So when young people serve in the public sector, they have a direct connection to how important the success, not just of themselves, but the at-large community is. Because once you work in the public sector, you begin to see how it's all connected and why it's so vital to be in this space. So that's something that we would like to pursue.
Thank you. Those answers are super informative and helpful. I really, really appreciate it.
Sure.
If I could just ask as a follow-up. So as a student, what would those programs look like that are encouraging young people to learn more about becoming a law enforcement officer? What particular programs would you like to see those funds go towards? And from a student perspective, how would you envision that?
I'm afraid, Dhruvi, I don't have that information in front of me. I apologize for that, but certainly I think SAFE and our team can follow up with you on that if you would like, on what that would look like. Would that work for you?
Yes, that would be great.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
And by the way, you said you're a senior in high school, so are you getting ready to go to college?
Yes.
Yeah, and have you picked a place yet?
No, I'm still waiting on most of my decisions, but I've been accepted into the University of Maryland.
Okay, well, that's a great school. I have 2 Terps in the family, so highly recommend that place.
That's great.
Awesome. Would you also just, I'll ask a question now. Could you go a little bit more into the year of service, what that would look like?
Yeah, Wes has spent as an entrepreneur and a small business owner, Bridge Edu. So essentially that his small business focused entirely on making sure students were successful when they went to college. And what he learned during the first year was that almost majority of the students, not only did they not complete their college education, but they failed during the first year. So his data showed that there was a lot of things that led to that, from transportation, from housing, food, to be able to have the funding to be able to go to school, mental health issues. So there was a whole array of issues that played into them not being successful during the first year. And as part of that, when he collected this data, he determined that, look, what if we were to take all the issues that they've been facing, a lot of which had to do with financial resources and not having that network of support around them. What if we were to make sure that they gave a year of service instead, where they would have the foundation, where they would have a support? Like I said, if you wanted to, let's say, do a service 1 year in a school system, you would probably, be considered like a paraeducator. So you'd be supporting a teacher in the classroom, and you'd be learning about a profession that maybe eventually that you would like to take part in. What happens in a lot of times during the first year of school, John and Hunter, Drew, and all who are here, most students don't have a clue what they want to be, during the first year of college. They're confused and they're lost. And so to be able to have a year of service instead of backpacking in Europe, if you happen to have the privilege and luxury of doing that, how about, backpacking right here in Maryland and supporting the people that are closest to you and to making sure our communities are successful. I think once we get elected, the Moore Miller administration will meet with students and talk about how can we make this best work for you during the first year. So we don't have all the details ironed out, but again, I think SAFE can follow up with you on the structure we do have available right now.
Thank you, Aruna. John, that was a really good question. I apologize to intrude on that part. There's something that we always talk about, the service year aspect is the financial literacy curriculum that is emboldened within that service year program, right? For a lot of the students, as Aruna had, Ms. Miller, has mentioned, that, that will give students an additional opportunity to explore, while they're exploring also be financially sustainable, right? And that is some additional aspect of it. And I know initially when Hunter and we talked about a few other policy points, especially on the support of HB 495, and I wanted to circle back and see if we are still following through with some of those questions as well, especially the youth-led protest and engaging with the civic engagement aspect of it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that answer. Are there any other additional questions? Okay, Drew.
I was wondering if you and Mr. Moore have a position on Delegate Bouquets' bill that wants to set certain standards for student member of the board voting rights.
So I've had the pleasure of serving with Delegate Lutke, and he's been a great proponent, of course, of students, him being a teacher himself. So usually just about anything Delegate Lutke proposes, I'm usually a big proponent of it. And I believe he did have a hearing recently, right? Like maybe last week on the bill. Yeah, because I was there right before that, where we were talking about collective bargaining rights for teachers so they can talk about class size, which we believe plays a big role into, student learning, as well as educators being able to be effective educators. So I personally support the bill. I can say that much from what I've read of it. I'm not sure where Wes is, but I can't imagine that Wes Moore wouldn't be behind something that elevates and uplifts students to be able to play a crucial role in the way our education is developed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hunter.
Yeah, real quick before I ask my question, I think you had a question earlier. I wanted to make sure that got to be answered.
Yeah, thank you, Hunter. So I just wanted to ask all of you how you came about and got into this organization, because what I found when I was in the legislature, most students I spoke to had no idea there was even such an organization like this. So how did you find out about it, and how are you able to reach out to other students to let them know about this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I could answer that, and John can pipe in if he'd like. But so we're actually a relatively new organization. We were technically founded in 2020, and we decided to take on an initiative called the Student Demonstrations Initiative. And that's the current House Bill 495. That's the bill that would protect student demonstrations across the state of Maryland in public schools. And we felt that when we were still in high school, that this was a necessary policy to be addressed either locally or statewide. So when we formulated that language into official bill language for the state of Maryland, we felt that it was important to get this message spread across the state. And so we organized a group of students to kind of advocate for it and to push it through. The bill did pass last year in the House of Delegates, and then unfortunately, due to time, it was stalled in the Senate, but we're able to bring it back this year, and with a little more momentum and a little more structuring and an official organization capacity. So we're really happy with that. And we also had a few other initiatives that John can talk about if he'd like. But yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I can go into the other two. So I just noticed one of them was actually put into chat, House Bill 201, which is a voter registrations initiative to mandate that each public high school in the state host a voter registration drive yearly in assistance with the local and state board of elections to basically provide opportunities for students across the state to have access to in-person voting registration resources. That was another very important initiative to us. The other one was led by our senior associate group, which was legislation to implement diverse curriculum standards for the English language arts department across the state. And I know Hunter has a question about that, so I'll lead him right into that.
Sure.
Yeah, that's actually what my question was going to be about. So I did want to ask, if you didn't have any other questions regarding our coalition, what I guess is your stance on diversifying either English language arts in the state, or maybe social studies curriculum, or just making curriculum in the state more diverse, more inclusive in nature? And maybe, would your administration be willing to spearhead an effort to diversify curriculum? Because as you probably know, as your work as a state delegate, the state is more hands-off when it comes to mandating curriculum guidelines. But a lot of students in the state feel that it's necessary for the state to evolve our curriculum. So I'd just like to know what your stance is on diverse curriculum.
Thank you, Hunter. So I can let you know that Wes and I believe that classrooms need to be spaces for our students to develop into critical thinkers. That means being exposed to different ideas of our history, both good and bad. And Wes is the only candidate in this race that had one of his books banned, and who was trained on military bases named after Confederate generals. He understands that we cannot cover up or hide from our history. When we whitewash our history, it's impossible to take lessons of the past and apply them to the situations we're facing today. And it makes it more likely that we'll repeat the same mistakes of our past. So we absolutely strongly, support diversifying our curriculum, and that we need to talk about the truth. Just because, you may disagree with something that our country or our school system is doing, doesn't mean, automatically that you're an enemy. Just like, when you're in a relationship with an individual, you're not going to 100% agree on everything he or she says. But, you agree to disagree, you respect where they're coming from, but you need to speak the truth. And we definitely appreciate MSC's position on this and your advocacy on this effort.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from either the candidate or students? Yes, Dhruvi.
I appreciate your answering all of my questions. There is a motion in a somewhat recent Howard County Board of Education meeting that one member made as a response to complaints by some parents in our school system about books in our libraries that covered LGBTQ themes. And there was a motion to have those books investigated for what they were calling child pornography. And obviously this is causing a lot of frustration and fear for LGBTQ students in Howard County and across the state. And even broader than that, as we see bills all across the country targeting LGBTQ students. Could you just speak on a little bit about how you plan to protect LGBTQ students in schools?
Thank you for the question. I'm not familiar with this incident. I apologize for that, but we should always protect our LGBTQ students. I can tell you when I was in the Maryland General Assembly, I was a sponsor of the marriage equality bill and any bill that related to fighting against discrimination. It is critical that our students are protected and that we are there for them. Look, there's a whole host of issues that students face when they're in school, from academic to social to emotional, many, many different things. And we need to, and one of them that they shouldn't be facing is their sexual orientation, okay? The fact of the matter is that any individual, whomever they should choose to love or whomever that they believe they are, as long as they're not harming anyone, we shouldn't be discriminating against them. We should be there supporting them. I've known students that have suffered quite a bit because of their sexual orientation, and it shouldn't be like that. So I will try to get myself more familiar with this, Dhruvi, I think you mentioned it, and read up on this more, but I'm sorry to hear that, this is happening.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any more questions? I think I saw a couple more people join, so not sure. If you haven't spoken yet, you're more than welcome to send the question in chat or what have you. Okay, Lily.
I had a quick question. So, as you probably know, the current political climate has been extremely heated for the past few years, and it seems like people are divided politically no matter the level of government. I think this creates a lot of arguing and prevents real issues that everyday people, such as students, face from being fixed. And what would you do to lower the temperature in today's political climate in order to make government more efficient?
Great question, Lily. Thank you for that. And you're absolutely right. There is a lot of division and divisiveness and dialogue that has taken place throughout our nation. I can tell you that just as an individual, whether it's my role as a parent or my role as an engineer or being a legislator or being a citizen in my community, is that I believe the quickest way to diffuse that type of hostility and anger in any given situation is to be a thoughtful listener. That just because a person has a different viewpoint from you, as I said earlier, doesn't automatically make them an enemy of yours. In fact, if you just take the time to thoughtfully listen to what their concerns are, instead of believing that only your opinion matters and your opinion is correct, I think that goes a long ways to diffusing a lot of anger, and you can bring people together just with that. And I have countless examples of scenarios like that have happened in my life. In fact, when I was a legislator, I had a constituent that would email me every single day about a bill. And I would write back to her and say, look, here's where I stand on this particular issue. If you'd like to, talk with me, please let me know. She would repeat the same email again. I mean, it got to the point where it was like harassment. And I didn't know how to resolve it. Then I said, you know what? Let me look her name up. Let me find her phone number, and I'm going to give her a call. And I have to tell you, I was really nervous to call this lady because I thought, oh my God, what is she going to do when she knows I'm on the other side of the phone here? So I call her up and I explain who I am. And then I tell her, look, you seem to be really upset. I keep getting repeated emails from you. I've responded to your email. Is there anything else that's bothering you? She starts telling me this whole story about her life and how she was adopting a young child from Korea and she's bringing them over here. And so it was almost like that's all she wanted to do, was that someone to be able to listen to her. And, I think, and after we had that conversation, that was the end of it. She no longer sent me those emails. She appreciated the fact that I called her, and she was actually quite surprised that a legislator would reach out to her and actually call her. So I think she had just from that singular experience, I think she had a whole different opinion about what legislators are and what their job is, and, what her feelings toward them are. And I think we get the same when the political party divisions. If someone on the other side of the party that in opposite of your party, you actually talk with them, you'd be surprised how much of that anger is diffused. I think in the media, they like to make it seem like 90% of the country is thinking this way. That is not true. Okay, I would say probably 10% of the population may be like that. 90% is pretty much, reasonable individuals that you can talk to. And even that 10%, I think if you take the time to understand that we all come from different walks of life, different experiences, different, challenges that we face, if you just understand that and you try to meet people halfway, I think it goes a long ways.
Well, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we have run almost out of time, so we can't take any more questions. There's been an email put in the chat by myself and the Westmore Miller campaign. So if you have any further questions, please email those to either of those email addresses, and we'll make sure to get that question answered and any follow-ups addressed. I'm going to leave it off to Hunter to close us up, but personally, just thank you so much for meeting with us.
Thank you, John. So thank you once again, Ms. Miller. We really appreciate having you. We do hope to have a few more Q&As before the primary election, but for now, this does conclude our Q&A series. Hopefully next time we can invite and have Mr. Moore sit down and talk to us about his stance on education issues. But for now, this does conclude our Q&A series. We hope that these series have been informative, and for those of you who are seeking to learn more information about candidates and their education platforms have found this engaging. More information on future events will be sent out via email, and anyone who's interested in receiving those updates should fill out the MSC form found in the link in the description of this video. Once again, thank you very much, Ms. Miller. If you have any closing comments, we'd be happy to hear them.
Well, I just want to say once again, thank you for all of you and your leadership in creating this organization and being in the forefront of our democracy. It's very meaningful and very important that you are engaged. And the only thing that I want to leave you with is one of my favorite quotes by Dr. Seuss. And he says, "Be who you are, say what you feel, because those who matter don't mind, and those who mind don't matter." So be who you are.
Thank you so much, Ms. Miller. Very, very inspiring. And thank you again to everyone who attended today. That's a wrap. Have a great day, everyone.